The real estate housing market is changing. There's no doubt about it. Those days of multiple offers and 20 buyers fighting over one home is pretty much going, or at least it's starting to fade. Home prices are also slowly starting to drop if you actually look at the market. So if you're a buyer looking to buy some real estate, whether it be a single family home or an investment property, now might be a good time for you to start looking. But as a buyer, what can you do to take advantage of this shifting housing market? Well, if you're looking to buy real estate in the near future, you're in the right place, because in this video, I'll give you some quick tips and strategies that you can use to take advantage of this housing market and find a good deal. Also, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments any real estate topics you want me to touch on in the future. All right, let's get right into it. The first thing you need to do if you want to take advantage of this shifting housing market is start to save up your money and start getting your credit in order. In order to buy a home, you're going to need about 6% of the purchase price. So for example, if you're buying a home for $300,000, you're going to need to save up around $18,000 in order to be able to buy a home. Now, I know you hear all type of things over the internet, such as zero money down programs and secret strategies for somebody to just give you a home on the spot and you don't have to do any work. But the reality of it is, if you want to buy some real estate, you're gonna need to save up some cash. Now, there are ways to avoid not needing as much money to close on a home, and we'll cover some of that at the end of the video. But these aren't 100% foolproof. So in other words, it's not gonna happen all the time. So I suggest if you're serious about buying real estate, you need to work on saving up that 6% of that purchase price so you can avoid losing out on a home. Now for the second tip, I know you guys hear me. Now for my second tip, if you watch my channel, I'm sure you hear me say this all the time. And I know by now you're probably sick of hearing it, but it's so important that I'm going to keep saying it. So my second tip for you is to get pre-approved for a loan if you're serious about buying real estate. The reason is because you can't really do anything. You can't make a move in real estate if you're not pre-approved for a loan. That is, unless you're just sitting on a ton of cash. If you want to take advantage of this housing market, you have to get pre-approved for a home loan. It's the only way sellers will take you serious if you even decide to make an offer. Without that, they won't even look at you. They'll just see you as a window shopper or somebody who's not serious about buying, because you can't prove that you can actually afford the money or that you can afford to buy the home. I know a lot of people don't like to go through the pre-approval process. It's kind of like going to the doctor or the dentist. You really don't want to do it unless you absolutely have to. But if you're buying real estate, you absolutely have to. Now, on a side note, I often hear people say they don't want to get pre-approved until they find the home that they want because they're worried about their credit getting dinged for that pre-approval. And my response to them usually is, you're using your credit to buy a home. A home is probably the biggest purchase you're going to make with your credit. So if you're not using your credit to buy a home, I mean, what else are you really using it for? This is what you spent all that hard-earned time building your credit up for. So if you're ready to buy a home, now's the time to use that credit. Don't be afraid to use your credit to get pre-approved, because in the end, that's what you have to do. Also, keep in mind that when you get pre-approved, the pre-approval normally lasts for about 90 days. So even if you don't find a home right away, you still have a good bit of time to find a home with that pre-approval without having to run your credit again. Tip number 3 for you guys is to pay attention to real estate that has been for sale for over 30 days. Now, the times of the summer months and home selling within days are pretty much gone. Homes are starting to stay on the market longer than before. This normally happens during the fall and the winter months, but when it does happen, it often catches sellers off guard. Once they see their properties staying on the market for longer than the average market time, they start to worry and they start to get desperate. Once they start to get desperate, you as a buyer can swoop in there and maybe be able to negotiate a lower price. If you want to take advantage of this housing market, start targeting properties that have been for sale for over 30 days. If you look at that property and that property meets all your expectations, by all means, shoot your shot, because you might be able to negotiate a great deal. For tip number 4, if you want a way to avoid needing to bring so much money to the closing table, start asking your seller for a closing credit or for a repair credit. Now, during the hot summer months, a lot of sellers actually were unwilling to give you a seller credit because the market was so hot they didn't have to. If you weren't going to, they could find another buyer who was willing to pay full price or didn't need a credit. Now that the market is starting to slow down and sellers are starting to get a little more desperate, now you have more leverage to be able to ask that seller to pay some of your closing costs. Also, keep this in mind. A mortgage lender will typically allow a seller to pay up to 6% of the purchase price and closing costs. Now, if you were paying attention to earlier in the video, you really only need to save about 6% of the purchase price to bring to closing to be able to buy a home. So that means if you can negotiate your deal right, you can get the seller to pay almost all of your closing costs, which means you're going to have to bring very little money to closing. But once again, that's if you take advantage of this housing market by being able to leverage it and leverage the fact that homes are staying on the market longer to convince the seller to pay your closing costs. Now, I know in this video I talk a lot about the housing market and how it's starting to shift more towards the buyer's favor. So if you want to know a little bit more about what the housing market is doing, click on this video here.